I always thought you were struggling to hold it all together, so I was willing to cut you some slack. Now I see I was wrong to ignore all those red flags. You weren't overwhelmed. You had just turned your back on everything you held sacred. For a bunch of lies. Today on the Comic Book Report, Firepower, Book 2 from Image Comics. Stick around and check it out. Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comics and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I'm back with another great from Image Comics. That's right, this is Firepower Book 2, which is the concluding chapter that wraps up Robert Kirkman and Chris Samnee's incredible martial arts base series. This was for me probably my most anticipated Image Comics release of the year. I loved when I got a chance to read and review Firepower Book 1, so really happy I finally got to take down this book, and I can't wait to talk to you about it today. Before we do though, I just want to say thank you and shout out our channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking to pick up your own comic book collected editions, I'd highly encourage you to check out their website. You can actually find a link for it in this video's description, and if you see anything there you like, you can actually use my discount code at checkout, The Comic Book Report, to save $2 off of your order. Please note if you use my affiliate link or code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission. But it's a fantastic way to support this channel. Thank you so much for considering. Now let's get started with today's comic book review. First, some quick facts about today's collection. The issues in this volume were written by Robert Kirkman and penciled by Chris Samnee. The comics in this volume were published by Image Comics beginning in 2021. As far as what this volume collects, it does include Firepower issues 13 through 30. And finally, this is an oversized hardcover edition with nice glossy print paper stock, a sewn binding, and a total of 464 pages. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and give a general spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the contents of this collection and commenting on plot points throughout. You've been advised. Okay, and here's our first look at today's oversized hardcover edition from Image Comics. And across this, we have art directly from the collection. This is the Johnson family, the main characters of this series, in battle-ready position. Absolutely love this cover. I think the colors are amazing. Character models are awesome. Overall, just a really outstanding pick for the cover of this book. The spine of the collection as well is really breathtaking. For me, I really love it. It has a lot of great uniformity with the book 1, other than the fact that they completely changed the color design, which is very, very fun. I'll actually show a kind of side-by-side with the book 1 shortly, so you can get a good idea for what this looks like next to the book 1, what it might look like on a bookcase, things like that. The back of the book has a nice blurb about the book itself, some description there. We have pricing information, kind of your standard stuff, what the book collects. And then we have another image taken from the collection. You get introduced to more of the characters here with this image. Overall, I was really impressed by the design of this book. I was really, really happy with it. Like I said, it looks great, and I think it looks awesome on the bookcase. And now that we've taken a look at the exteriors, I did want to take a moment just to show that sewn binding, just for all the prospective collectors out there. Now, I will say this is a nicely bound book. I think it laid pretty flat overall. I didn't really have any issues with gutter loss, to say the least, which is really nice. One thing I will say was that the binding might have been a little bit rigid or stiff. It's not the most loose binding, but I certainly didn't have too many problems with it, and there was even a nice eye. And now, as I mentioned a moment ago, I wanted to do some comparison shots with the book 1. As you can see, the first collection really does favor the warmer color palette, the oranges, yellows, reds for the firepower design, which I like. Volume 2, though, while we do have some of those elements, it definitely favors a cooler color palette, leaning more into the blues of varying shades. I did like that. I like that there's some consistency, but there's also a different flavor as well. As we transition to, I wanted to take a look at both spines so you can just see what they look like. I will say all the fonts, everything is maintained from the first volume. They just, again, changed the colors a bit. So even the look of the Firepower logo looks quite a bit different with these new colors. I just thought it was worth pointing out just for collectors out there to get an idea of what you're going to be getting. I think this looks outstanding on the bookcase. My only real complaint is that this series didn't run longer. Okay, now we can go ahead and break into the actual collection itself. We have some beautiful end pages again with the kind of fire design, which I love seeing. Again, favoring that cooler color palette. After that, we have some title pages, publication page information, things like that. And then basically, we're off to the races. We have a chapter break or chapter heading where it says chapter 4, and we dive right into that issue 13. Now, this is a note I will make about both collections, the book 1 and 2, in case you missed my review of the book 1, which I did do on the channel. This actually doesn't have each issue with the cover on the front of each issue as you read sequentially through them. Rather, it has these kind of chapter breaks, so they're just different arcs or portions of the book that are offset with these chapters. But other than that, we don't have the actual issue covers until the back of the book. Yes, during the extras portion, which I will get to toward the end of this video, you have all of the covers in there. They are the virgin covers, so we have no text on them, just the artwork. But you get this kind of idea of what the covers were. You just don't have that placement in this book itself. Now, I know that is not the favorite of some collectors out there. I know I personally like seeing where the individual issues were, so I could simulate that single issue experience the best I can. But this definitely does a good job of not interrupting the main narrative. It reminds me a lot of what Jonathan Hickman does. Certainly, if you've collected any of the Hickman Marvel omnibuses like Fantastic Four, or his work with Avengers, or even Secret Warriors, he's a fan of this as well, where you almost have the chapter breaks that are around, like, each trade paperback collection or what have you, story arc breaks, rather than the actual issues there. Anyway, it's just worth mentioning that that is the case for this series, and that was consistent with book 1 as well. And book 1 was kind of interesting because it began with a graphic novel prelude to the main series, and then the first 12 issues of the ongoing series. And then, as I mentioned earlier, this is issues 13 through 30, which round out the collection. So yes, this is book 2 of a 2-volume set. So it's all here. This is the kind of ultimate conclusion to this run, this series, and I, for one, am gonna miss it. So what is Firepower? I'll try to go a little bit into the setup of this series for, again, those that are just watching this volume 2 without the volume 1. This is a martial arts based kind of chosen one mythical kind of storytelling, kind of storyline, I should say. So it is something to maybe what you've read before or seen in different mediums that kind of just go into this genre. Certainly, if you're a Marvel Comics fan like myself, if you've read something like The Immortal Iron Fist, all that Danny Rand stuff, this is in a very similar ballpark where we have kind of this chosen one martial arts expert that gets trained up. He has some abilities that are borderline magic, and he has to sort of save the day, fight evildoers, right wrongs, things like that. But of course, this is a Kirkman series, so we have a lot of great character development, as always. I am a huge Robert Kirkman fan ever since I first started reading Walking Dead and Invincible, and this is honestly up there as one of my favorite Kirkmans. It was maybe gone too soon, but it also didn't overstay its welcome. I thought this series was really well paced overall. I will say I think we could have gotten a couple extra issues here maybe, but yeah, I think it was really well done. They definitely landed the plane, so I don't want to bury that lead. I was very happy with the conclusion of this book. But yeah, that's what we have here. The art throughout this is also, again, from the incredible Chris Samnee, who did the art in book 1. This was really co-created by both of these creators. We just had Kirkman on the writing and Samnee on the pencils. But we definitely have a great synergy between these two. I really love how they came together to tell this story, and it's just really something to behold. At the end of book 1, or actually throughout book 1, we're introduced to Owen Johnson, who is a man who basically finds his way to kind of monastic martial arts temple at the top of these mountains, and he gets trained by this order to become kind of a martial arts expert. And this whole faction basically has this thing called the Firepower. It's sort of this legendary technique where someone can produce a fireball from their hands, and we find out that Owen Johnson is kind of the chosen one. He's able to conjure the Firepower, but he leaves the order, and that's actually all happening in the graphic novel, and the ongoing series begins 15 years later, I believe, where he's married, has some kids, some kind of a teenager, kind of a preteen, a daughter and a son, respectively. And he's just living kind of a suburban dad life, but his old life with these kind of martial arts ninja factions, these kind of rival mystic ninja orders kind of come to his door. And all of a sudden he's fighting for the survival of not only himself, but his family and maybe the order and the world at large. This was all covered mostly in book 1, which was really fun as well. Obviously, I'd recommend reading that before picking up this volume 2. But what was cool about that book as well is that we finished the first major story arc or two. It did cliffhang a little bit for this volume, but volume 1 gives you a lot of closure. And so what we start here with volume 2, it picks up right after the events of volume 1. We have the Johnson family returning home after all of these exploits and adventures, and they basically want a return to normalcy, but they are a bit changed. We have the kids practicing martial arts at school. We found out right away that his elder daughter actually is able to produce her own firepower, and hers is kind of blue in color. Even his wife, who is a police officer, her partner was kind of an undercover member of this order of sort of ninjas, and so even their normal is a little bit different than it was. We have them reunite with their Owen's parents, who were his adopted parents, who were like a really great kind of lighter-hearted touch in the first book. And so the first issue of this book almost feels like a return to normal, almost epilogue. But then we do, on the monastic order, we do have these snakes that are coming out. We have some rumblings and some interesting things happening at the order on top of the mountain. We have these snakes who show up that when they bite people, they latch on and they kind of get taken over. Their eyes glow green and they're being controlled by some other entity or person. And there's this whole kind of omen of the snake order that has to do with the legend of the dragon from the temple in the first book. Anyway, I won't get into that too much. But yeah, book 1 kind of established that there might be something going on with these snakes, and that's certainly what we have here in the beginning. Basically, that whole kind of monastery gets starting to get taken over by these snakes who bite people and then kind of become this sort of hive mind or kind of under the sway of this ultimate bad guy who's returning from the stone. It's really, really fun, but then we actually have snakes showing up at the Johnson home, and we have that under threat. So right away, just when you want to relax, Owen and his family are thrust right back into the next adventure. We have actually Owen's old flame, the love interest that was introduced in the graphic novel Prelude. We see that she's actually sort of stalking the family or trying to keep eyes or tabs on them to make sure they're safe. She kind of comes out of the shadows to help when a snake-bitten person tries to attack the family. This leads to an awkward confrontation between her and Owen's wife and even Owen, which leads to a really cool marital sort of interlude afterwards where we have Owen and his wife talking about how she's not necessarily threatened by this woman, but it does make her feel a bit insecure that she just didn't know that she was still alive. And we have Owen kind of debriefing that revelation he got toward the end of the first collection. And this was just a really good moment. I think that moments like this are really what make Kirkman shine above almost everything else. Yes, the man can do some great twists and turns and come up with some great story premises, but it's really these character moments that feel so authentic and lived in that really just hook me as a reader. And this was just such a beautiful sequence. After that, we basically have Owen and his wife following up with that old flame character to investigate what's happening on the monastery, what's happening on this kind of kung fu island that's sort of run by his old flame's dad. What's going on? They think that these snakes are a bad omen and they want to check in. They leave the children with his parents, the grandparents, along with his wife's cop partner, who's also kind of a martial arts expert, just kind of believing they're more safe with them than along with them, especially if there is a threat. Well, things really do begin to go from bad to worse for the Johnson family. They arrive at this place to see it's totally overrun by these snake-bitten people that are under this order. They get jailbreak from some of the villains in the first one, and we just are introduced to this big bad who's resurrected after all this time, and he's basically trying to wake up the dragon that this whole monastery has been trying to keep imprisoned. Now, Owen did go into the dragon's lair at the end of the first book, but he didn't see anything there, which made him believe that this is a total fiction, so he's not overly concerned beyond the general snakes and trying to save the people of the monastery. But we find out that the dragon is indeed real, and the big bad has resurrected this dragon who is now going to just destroy parts of the world. We find out as well in these ensuing battles that the firepower does kind of kill these snakes, and it's maybe the only thing that can kill or at least put the dragon back to sleep. So this is where we have kind of the mythic quality of this whole legend here of the firepower, and so we know that Owen Johnson is going to be a staple character to stop the dragon, stop the evil kind of snake order, and save the world. But what we don't know is that basically back home things are getting worse, and so the cop kind of partner of the wife shows up with the children saying, hey, they need your help, but they bring them right into the general disaster of all these snakes taking over and the dragon coming out of the ground. Along the way, though, we find out that his children can now both wield the firepower, and it's not long before his wife and some of these other martial arts characters are eventually able to wield it as well. We find out that the actual firepower can change color based on what emotion drives the formation of the firepower, like love, hate, regret, jealousy, or envy, things like that. It is really fascinating to see how they kind of explore the sort of magic system of this world in the place of the firepower. We have Owen actually developing the fire fists, so instead of just throwing the firepower, he can actually have them on his fist. He uses them to kind of fall with style, defy gravity, and kind of offset falling, which was kind of cool. Now, I am jumping around the storylines a bit, but essentially from here, Owen Johnson takes the rest of the monastic orders who are trying to go against this dragon, who is being led by the big bad all around the world and just causing devastation and just amazing disasters across big cities. And he basically trains them up to try to stop the dragon, to try to get as many people the firepower and train them up as he can for an ultimate final battle. Along the way, we do have a couple run-ins between the dragon, the evil people, and the Johnsons and the rest of the martial arts order. So we have a couple skirmishes before the final battle. Along the way, we have a lot of great character defining moments for a lot of the family. We have moments between the husband and wife, the old flame. We have moments where we have Owen confront his old instructor after a horrible revelation of what that instructor did to his actual biological parents. And then we have kind of a rounding up of the old masters of other different kind of monastic martial arts orders from around the world. Again, everyone trying to come together to stop this evil and the dragon. I really, really liked it. Throughout all of it, we have just incredible action sequences, and essentially the whole series resolves when they take on the dragon and they're able to stop it with the firepower, and it basically gets put back to sleep, where it will hopefully not awaken for some time. We also have this interesting dynamic where everywhere the dragon destroyed and caused these horrific events, there's new life and kind of forestry growing out of it. So they almost treat the dragon like this inevitable force of nature that can never be totally destroyed, just put back to sleep. And I really liked that. I think the lore around that was really cool. And yeah, we have the good guys beating the bad guys. We have some moments of, his rival kind of gets held under the sway by the snakes and the dragon, but he's ultimately brought back, things like that. And then the last part of the series, we have sort of an epilogue, which is years and years in the future, where Owen is now the mentor master at this monastery, and his family is still kind of practicing and together, and it's just a really cool full circle moment from the beginning of the series all the way back in the graphic novel. Really beautifully done with art from Samnee throughout. This was a real treat. I love the action sequences throughout. I love the inclusion of more firepower wielders and the incredible dragon, to say the least. I think it lets Samnee flex his muscles even more compared to the book one, which I just didn't think was possible, but here we are. I think for me, book one might have hit me a little bit more just because I loved getting to know the characters. And I think one of my favorite dynamics was actually the romance we got with his old flame character in the original graphic novel. It was beautiful and yet tragic, especially when you find out what happened with that whole situation. And I do think that this book, too, really put the focus more back on the Johnson family itself. And I love that Kirkman stressed the fidelity of the marriage and how that was just central. Like, his old flame didn't stand a chance in book two, which I thought was really well handled. I like that they didn't make it this prolonged love triangle, but I do like that other character a bit more, and I think she was underutilized in this volume overall. They did have a good resolution for her where she appears to have fallen in love with the cop partner of the wife, which I did like, but I do think that that character dynamic was maybe underutilized in this book, but I did like how Kirkman focused on the marriage relationship. I actually think that that was outstanding. I love that we got more agency for some of the main family members as well, like the children. I think were all really well done, and some of the beloved characters from the first volume just had more moments to shine. I thought that was just really great, and honestly, I couldn't have been happier with how this series resolved. At the back of the book, as I mentioned earlier, we do have a handful of extras, which is great to see. We have kind of production, staged artwork, original art reproduced here. Really like seeing behind the scenes of that. Alongside it, we have kind of a transcribed interview with the series creators, which was nice. Then we have the full cover art gallery. Again, these are kind of the virgin covers, so we don't have a ton of the text, but we do have all the covers reproduced here. I think we even have some variant covers, which is nice. And then afterwards, we actually have an afterword or an epilogue or an essay from both of the creators, Robert Kirkman and Chris Samnee, and that really rounds up most of the extras for the book. I, for one, always like seeing some written extras at the back of the collection, especially for a series I really loved, so I really enjoyed seeing that these creators did have that for this deluxe edition. I just think it was super, super nice. After that, we really only have a page talking about other works from these creators or from Image Comics, and that really is book 2 of Firepower. And now all that's left is to give this book a grade. For successfully concluding an already incredible series with lush artwork on every single page, the Comic Book Report is more than happy to give Firepower Book 2, the hardcover edition, an A-. This is easily one of my more favored of Robert Kirkman's bibliography, and the art from Samnee just make it absolutely unforgettable. If you enjoyed this subgenre of martial arts, chosen one kind of archetypes or narratives, this is a must-read recommend from me. If you enjoy generally these creators or looking for an Image comic book to read or a series that's maybe not too long but you can still enjoy the ride, this is definitely a really good book to check out. I do think there's a lot of people that have found this series and liked it, but I hope there's more that maybe find it through this video. Thanks everyone so much for watching. Let me know what you think of Firepower in the comments below, or if you have comic book recommendations from either of these two comic creators. I would honestly love to read more from both of their catalogs. Thanks everyone, and until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to give this video a like, a comment, and maybe share it with a friend. Thanks so much, and have a good one.